2, 1. And good afternoon. It is Thursday at the slightly earlier time of noon o'clock. How you doing, guys? This is Jamie and David, and we're joined by the wonderful Rhiannon Giddens. Hey, Rhiannon, how you doing?
Good.
Thanks for joining us.
On the
Thanks for joining us.
opposite end of the day than you guys, but
It's later in the evening. You're over on the other
yeah,
side of the Atlantic today.
yeah.
So we really appreciate you joining us. Rhiannon, obviously a longtime Deering banjo artist and a founding member of Grammy Award winning Carolina Chocolate Drops. She has since forged a very successful solo career, and her latest album, There Is No Other, is an outstanding piece of work. And she's here now to talk about it. And what I'm sure and what we hope will be a host of other fascinating topics to go along with it, given there is the wonderful Rhiannon Giddens. Welcome to Deering Live. And Dave Bandraki is with me as always. Hi, Dave.
Hey, Jamie. Hey, Rhiannon. Good to be here.
There we go. All right. Would you mind playing us in a little something? And then we'll go for it.
I will. I'm gonna play an oldie but a goodie.
All right.
Yeah. Great to hear you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I wanted to just kind of start off, just kind of diving in, talking about your album that you released at the end of last year. There's No Other.
Was it last year? Or was it the year before?
Oh, really? 2 years now.
Yeah, we got a new one coming out in April.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's that called?
They're calling me home.
All right. Let's talk about that a little bit. Who did you do it with, and what's the instrumentation kind of?
Well, we weren't. I did There Is No Other with my partner Francesco Teresi, and it was kind of a going back to a more minimal sound. I'd kind of when I started doing solo stuff, and I started off with T-Bone Burnett for my first solo record, and I went from a string band, and before that I hadn't done any kind of drum set, or I used to swear I'd never play with the bass, and and just found the right combo and started doing big band things, and that was kind of that for a while. And then at the end of the last tour, I just was really wrecked, and I just said I just got to take it back a little bit.
Right.
And so that record was really an investigation and kind of exploration of all the points of connection that Francesco and I have, and through us, the music that we espouse. I'm on one side of the Atlantic, he's on the other. So for the next one, the plan was to go back to an ensemble, and we were going to work in California, and all of that got scuppered because of COVID. So we were always planning on doing another one, kind of not a sequel, or anything to There Is No Other, but we knew we'd want to go back and do that again and explore other things. And so it was just him and I and some lovely folks in Ireland, and we just said we got to make something because we're going a little crazy. We were lucky that we got into the studio right before all the lockdowns started coming back again. And yeah, the music that we'd been kind of just exploring, which is a lot of traditional stuff, a lot of really old stuff that I started off learning in the old time world, years and years ago, and just kind of connecting to our own roots, and discovering the comfort that those old songs have, at times like this. So digging down to, kind of primal stuff in some ways as well. So yeah, I'm excited for that to come out. We're just finishing it up, the artwork and everything, and I'm sure I'll talk more about it, but I don't even know how much I'm supposed to say. But
Well, I'm excited to hear it. But There's No Other album recording is fantastic. You mentioned it's a minimalism sort of sound, but the thing that strikes me so much is how fat and big of a sound you'll get with it being so cut down.
yeah,
Sometimes just a banjo and frame drums, and it still sounds like a full. It doesn't just sound like you put a mic and played some tunes, which
right.
can happen when you strip it down so much. Sometimes it really sounds that. Is there any? How do you think you achieved that sort of sound?
Well, it was kind of the whole reason that we met at all was Francesco he's knows a lot. He's degrees in, and he's taught it, and he's played it. He knows a lot about jazz, and he comes from Italy, so he's coming from sort of a different perspective, and how he learned jazz, and he learned from a lot of I think one of his teachers hardcore bebop. I don't know the terms, but real traditional way of learning, orally, and just kind of just do it, this kind of stuff. And he was really he has a respect of the history that's not kind of wrapped up within it, because he's from Italy, and he heard the Chocolate Drops, and he was like, this is missing link. Why does nobody talk about this? He could hear the sound, and which is true. Black string band music is often completely forgotten in histories of jazz, histories of blues, histories of American music, histories of country, history of bluegrass. It's it's at the heart of all of those things, but it's never talked about. And he reached out to me and he said, I think our sound worlds would sound good together. He just had this instinct that, his Mediterranean sounds, and so when we first got together, we just realized pretty quickly that his frame drums and tambourines and stuff connected completely with my banjo, especially the banjos, that I've have a darker sound and an older style. So we just kind of realized that it takes up all of the wavelength or all the sound waves or whatever. It takes up all those little. There's
Yeah.
places where sound can get into, and banjo and the drum. And in fact, we play often with a fantastic bass player, upright bass player named Jason Cipher, who I've played with for many years. And we have to be very careful because like the frame drum actually is in the same spot as the bass, so we have to, it's like it really is that big of a sound when it's amplified, correctly, and it just between the two and then the voice on top, it just kind of occupies. And so we were really excited about that because neither one of us had really had that experience of being able to fit so completely with another person's instrumentation.
Yeah. I mean, listening to the title track, There Is No Other, where it's just a duet of banjo and drum. You know, it it really showcases how they just fit together so well, just like you were saying just now. But then it also kind of harkens back to the original, the roots of the banjo in Africa when the banjo's playing with hand drums. It's completely different types of drums and different rhythms that are happening. But it just seems that it kind of works together. Would you agree with that, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's a different, like a lot of the places where the ancestors come from, it's a different kind of drum. It's a different kind of drumming. It's a different function. So we are reaching across, it's not an obvious thing to have
Yeah.
frame drum and banjo. And the connection is, I mean, it kind of mirrors, there's very interesting connections, the way that the, trans-Saharan Arabic slave trade connected North Africa and West Africa. I mean, it's very, and then, frame drums are played all over North Africa, so there's just lots of layers to it, I think, but it's not necessarily a sound that's obvious, until you play it, and then you're like, oh my God, that's great, but you wouldn't think, given history, I wouldn't have put those two things together, And the other thing that we found is all the rhythms that he plays on that fit so beautifully with the technique that I've come into, which is a combination of playing with Joe Thompson, who was a black fiddler from North Carolina and kind of heir to a very long line of black string bands players, and then studying a lot of techniques from the 1850s, when the first banjo tutors were put out, and those kind of have combined over the years in my body and in my hands, and so it's actually extremely easy to play with him. I find that the way that I play with the fifth string, I do a lot of things with it, that aren't really, they come from all the stuff that I've done inside the basic clawhammer technique, and it just fit with that just, and I never would have expected that, so,
Mhm.
That doesn't even, bring in the Italian, it's more of the Mediterranean stuff and like the minstrel banjo. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of layers.
Yeah. And then was this your second time working with Joe Henry as a producer?
Yeah, for There Is No Other. Yeah, he first time not as a chocolate drop. So because he done the Carolina chocolate drop record that won the Grammy, that was his
Yeah.
producing, and that was the first time I'd worked with him. And over the years, he's kind of called me into, I've done really amazing things. Like I was on Alan Toussaint's last record. He's called me in to come sing here and there, and we'd been talking about doing a record together for a long time, and so it finally came in. We were planning on another one, but that'll have to wait for another day.
So how do you think he pulls such great performances and from the artists he works with? 'Cause, yeah,
Joe? Oh, he's
everything he'd worked as a producer, everything he works with, it really brings another depth of the artistry out of people, rather than just, again, the sound of putting a mic in front of somebody and saying play.
yeah, he's of the he's kind of the T-Bone school. I know that he's worked a lot with T-Bone.
Right.
But he has his own thing. There's this confidence in him, and an absolute trust that he has for you, the artist. It's like he knows that you're going to do the thing that you need to do, and he just needs to create the space for that. But he also knows when to go, let's try this, and when to not say anything.
Mm.
That's really hard, actually.
Yeah.
I think it's a very skillful thing, because then you can kind of get into a space of absolute trust as an artist and go, well, and he works with great engineers. And Ryan, oh, what's this? I forgot. I'm blanking
All right.
on the wonderful man who did our sound. Huh?
I'll come back.
You know. I can't, just totally blanking. So sorry, I love you. Because he's a genius. Like, he's such a great sound engineer. And we sat down, and there's kind of a joke that we never knew when we were actually playing the take, like, because we were switching instruments. We had spread everywhere. They were everywhere because we were still at the beginning of our partnership too, so we were still figuring out what worked together. So there's all this discovery. And so we just kind of think, we just pick maybe this, pick up, and we start playing, and that would be the take.
Right.
And he had Ryan. It was Ryan Freeland. He had it. He was always there. It was like we'd be talking and something, and he would just be kind of creeping around, and he would just adjust that, go back into the thing, and then so like the very first set of roughs, they all had sentences on them. They all had me talking right before, because, and he cleaned them up beautifully. There's one he left on, which was cool. How does this go? I don't know. And we'd literally just bang, and that was an amazing experience because we were it was 5 days, from beginning to finish, and we were kind of in this alternate state, for most of it. And yeah, it was special. It was a special a thing for sure.
And how if there's probably a number of artists watching, how important is it that you think to work with a producer when you're making a recording? A lot of artists on a certain level don't get a chance to work with a producer, or they don't really understand the importance of that part of it. So what would you say to those artists that are kind of watching to try to teach them something maybe about that aspect of recording?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I I've worked with quite a few different producers now, and this record that we just did, we produced ourselves because we had to, you know, and it was an interesting experience. And we're happy that we did it this way because of just the situation and the material. It made sense. But I'm quite happy to go back to having a producer for the next record. You know what I mean? It's like, I think it's really important to have somebody who is outside of the creative process. I mean, maybe they're helping finish a song or something like that, but they're outside of the recording process, and they have ears that are in the booth, not in the recording room. And I think that it is important to have. What ends up happening a lot when you're producing your own material, what can happen is that you start relying on the engineer to get that extra set of ears, and that's not the engineer's job. The engineer is supposed to capture the most beautiful sound, the best, and that's what all of their energy should be going to. And if you start leaning on them to start making decisions for you, that's not particularly fair, I think. It starts widening, and then it's just like, unless that's what they really want to do, and in which case they're starting to help you produce it. So it's a different job. So I think, I think a lot of people would do, I think there's some people who can do it, obviously they self-produce and it's fine. I think some people probably will always want a producer. I think some people I think it's a project by project basis. I think I'm always going to go towards having a producer, but what I've discovered is that I want to say in it, and I want to, there might be some projects where I want to be a co-producer.
Right.
Want
to be a team.
Huh?
You'd like it to be a team effort, a joint effort. you don't want
Yeah, I mean there might be some where I'm like, no, y'all pick. I'm just gonna sing.
to. Right.
You know, if it's like a covers record, that's I'd be more, But if it's my original material, if it's something that's a concept album or something, then I want to be involved. I really think it's a project by project basis, but I do think that if you can get someone, you have to get the right one, and sometimes they're cost prohibitive, but if you can manage it, and you get someone who has done records that you admire, I think that's really important.
Yeah.
And they've worked with people that you like, and ask them how it was to work with them, because you can't go, "Oh, it's gonna last one," or "This is what it's supposed to be." Like, really do go to people who've done stuff with them and go, "How was it? What was it like?
Hmm.
Were they in the booth all the time? Were they out? Were they involved? Did they have lots of ideas? Did they do a lot of post production? Did they, and then you can decide what you want out of that."
Yeah. Let's talk about your banjos a little bit. I know, we have it's all banjo fans that are that are here, and you're playing a number of different instruments as of late, and on your record that we've been talking about, you've used a Minstrel style banjo. Uh, so
Yeah.
you,
So this one, just because I have it, I mean, I obviously, I started off playing, was all Deering. My first banjo was Deering, and then my next banjo was Deering, and then my next banjo was Deering, and then I went Minstrel, and I haven't gone back. And they're all in Nashville, which is really annoying. I don't have any of them here. But I kind of, when I started playing nylon or Nile gut, which is an imitation gut string, it's actually been quite hard for me to go back to metal string. So this is actually a turn of the century banjo I bought at Grun's Guitars. J.F. Luscombe's professional patent, whatever, Marshfield Mess. I don't know. I'm not a gearhead. I don't really care. I just care about the sound. But I just love this banjo because it is nylon strung, but it still has this. I can kind of get a little bit back to the sound that I used to have and what I had
yeah,
for a long time.
and it looks like a
Um,
shorter
and
scale.
if I need to.
Sorry to interrupt. Is it a shorter
Hmm?
scale banjo as well? Too, the one you just had in your hand?
No,
No.
that's regular.
Okay.
No, it's a G. It's a G banjo.
Okay. Cool.
You know.
And then you're gonna
Yeah.
go
I
grab.
have a banjo. I have also 1898. I have an 1898 banjarine, but that's also back in Nashville. It's an A scale banjo. I love it. I bought it years ago. It's very, very cool. But yeah, I only have four banjos here. It's so sad. So this is my axe, I suppose. Made by Jim Hartle. Beautiful. He is such an amazing craftsman. There's an American craftsman or American. There's a series on American craftspeople, and they did a piece on him, and they interviewed me for it. It's really, really cool. Um, but yeah, just beautiful. This is a replica of, I think, a couple of different a couple of different banjos from roughly 1858, by a banjo maker named Levi Brown. And Jim sort of took, I think he kind of combined a few of Levi's banjos. But I think one of the most interesting things about it is that it has this guitar headstock. So this is Levi's design, not Jim's. Jim's just copying it. Not just. I mean, he's an amazing artist on his own right, but I just mean he's not putting a modern guitar stock on it. This was how it was in the 1850s. And you see the guitar tuners here, and it's amazing how steady it makes this. It's a fretless instrument with a skin head,
Uh-huh.
and what would have been gut strings. Obviously, this is Nalga. Aquila is an amazing string company, and they have a very good imitation gut. They're a little heavier than nylon. They just have a sweet
Who makes it?
Aquila.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do a lot of like Renaissance strings and gut strings and stuff. And it's a little bit heavier than nylon. It's got a bit of a sweeter sound, And then I've been miking it from the back when I play with. This is a percussion mic.
Okay.
When I play with drum set and electric guitars and stuff. But now I'm just doing the ear trumpet. We're just doing now an ear trumpet lab, mic in the front, and that's just
Play a little
obviously it's yeah, it's a couple of 255. Here, I'll maybe do. So I'm in low C tuning, not double C, but it's called gumbo chaff tuning.
bit? Wow. What's the
It's an
notes?
interesting. Huh?
What are the notes?
See, 1, 3, 5, da, instead of da da. So that one, the low string goes down a step. I think it's F maybe. So you can play either in that key, or you can play in C or F. I'm a little distracted because my nail, I've had this beautiful nail for weeks, and it just broke literally yesterday, which is
I
always the way.
understand. I think
I put my
everybody,
hand in something and it just broke.
all the Clawhammer
You know.
players here understand that issue. No worries.
Tell you what.
All right. That sounds amazing. That I love the low the low depth of it, and especially when you make that run down, that bass run. How do you
Yeah.
approach
Now those are 3 tunes from 1955. Yeah,
from when? 1955?
55. They're from the banjo instructor time. Somebody actually put this banjo, and there's a lot of amazing tunes in there.
What was that book again? It cut up a little bit. We couldn't hear you.
It's called the Briggs Banjo Instructor.
Okay. Very cool.
And Joseph Wiedlich, I may be saying his name wrong, but he took the book, which was in actually standard notation, which I don't read standard notation on the banjo. I don't know many people who do, so he put it in tablature form and just made it accessible for people who didn't want to try to translate it. So it's great. It's available. You can get it off Amazon.
Oh, well, they put it back in print.
Yeah. I mean, because he did it. He took the songs and he sort of contextualized them and talked about Briggs, and then put it in nice, very legible tablature. It's Center Stream uh, company puts it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can check it out on
Check it
Amazon.
out. Interesting. How do you approach the fretless banjo, or differently than standard fretted banjo? Is there a different approach to them, or just kind of wing
Well,
it?
there's there's I mean, I play the fiddle,
Yeah,
so that helps. That I learned how to play that first, and so the idea of a fretless instrument was still scary, but not as scary maybe.
hmm
And also, but the thing is that actually the technique that is so different for this is not. I mean, this you have to find the notes, and then you have all these slides, and then you can do microtones if you want, if you're good enough. Like I'm not, but you have a lot of freedom in there. But the thing about this is the give the strings, you know. Um, the fact that there's so much give to them means that the technique is different. And like if you play I used to play these Briggs tunes on modern banjo, and they sounded fine. But then when I played them on this, the give that the strings have gives you this kind of bounce and this ability to do some really different rhythmic things that didn't make it into clawhammer style. This is called, what I was playing there, it's called stroke style.
right.
And there's a lot of techniques in this that did not translate. Not translate. They didn't make it when this kind of started to morph and become, regional styles, and what we know of is sort of old time frailing, banjo playing. A lot of the really special stuff for me, when I find this stuff, and the stuff that really brings out that 3-against-2 thing that we associate with African descended musics, I'm trying to think. If there's a lot of thumb work, you know. I mean, if you just hearing that, the emphasis that you can give, it really just like it pulls out this extra. There's a whole different layer of rhythm in these very simple tunes
Right.
when you play them on the instruments that they're meant for.
Right.
And for me, that's where the connection to, I mean, I studied like pre-banjo instruments, like I studied the akonting a little bit and went to the Gambia. And I mean, I didn't do, what Bela did, but like I was lucky enough to get there for 2 weeks. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
I was,
Right.
not in the position that Bela's in. So that's fine. But what I discovered was when I found this, you know, I was like, oh, this is kind of the connector between, those kind of instruments and what we now think of as the banjo. Like
Right.
this is where I wanted to start spending time because I was hearing ancestral things in this instrument playing these tunes, and then starting to adapt other things, and then my banjo style altogether has really, you know, uh, just kind of conformed to this, and I found out things that I had the ways that I had played, playing with Joe Thompson, like fit so naturally on this banjo. It's just a lot of things came together when I picked it up for sure.
Yeah, you can really hear the difference in your playing style now versus, during your earlier records. And, I guess what's just what you said, the banjo is really kind of the different instrument that you're using has kind of changed your playing style in that way, correct?
Yeah, it definitely is. I've just kind of sunk into it, and I'm just like I'm discovering things, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. And then, now that I'm playing with Francesco, I'm like even more. There's these things that I was hinting at, and then he starts playing the frame drum, and I'm like, that's all in here. That's right. I was kind of hinting at that. Now I can just kind of like let go and be in it. So it's amazing.
How would you, if you concisely, without getting too deeply into it, how would you kind of say what is that different? How would you describe what stroke style banjo playing is?
Oh gosh, yeah, I'm no expert. Um, there's just there. It's a oh God. How do I explain? Whereas the clawhammer technique is all based on the boom ticka boom ticka boom ticka boom ticka boom ticka boom. Obviously, there's many variations of that, but kind of the backbone of it. There's nothing like that in stroke style. There's
Mhm.
no, you don't just like as you can hear all three. The reason I played those three tunes is they all three sound very different. You know, this is a in three or six. I mean, just even that. I mean, that good bone. There's all this like really interesting, either pre-syncopation or syncopation, whatever you want to call it, in there that disallows the chicka 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 chicka. Just keep going. When I'm playing that banjo, like I was playing Georgia Buck. I mean, that's just and whether I can take a moment and highlight different things, but it's all still going back to this. Whereas stroke style is much more, there's much more things going on in terms of, and it's serving a different purpose as well. A lot of it's for songs, a lot of it's accompanying songs and stuff like that. So, I mean, not that old time banjo isn't, but yeah, I don't know. It's just, it hasn't been, it's still very much kind of figuring itself out, I think, and very nascent. It's very, there's all these, yeah, I don't know. It just, it's a bounce, it's bouncier. It's, God, what I wouldn't give for Greg Adams to walk in right now and just say the perfect 2 sentences about stroke style because he knows. I don't know. I can hear it. I can play it. I don't know if I can say it.
I understand. No problem. Yeah, there's an album by Michael Miles that that you're playing reminds me of. You familiar with him? He's a banjo player. I think he teaches at the Old Town School of Folk Music. Yeah, he plays fretless banjos and probably in that same style. I never really knew exactly that it was stroke style. So there's
Well, just because he's playing a fretless banjo doesn't mean he's playing stroke style.
No, not because it's fretless. It's the same rhythmic sort of thing that's going on.
Okay, yeah.
Let's see. So then, let's see. The banjo, your banjo has a checkered history, and you're a real good scholar. You have become quite a scholar of the of the history of the instrument, and it's been such a integral part of American cultural history. Do you want to just kind of talk about, how much a part of the banjo has been part of American history?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's checkered. Yeah, I don't know. It's I'll move to this banjo now. This is my Gourd Banjo, made by Teilhard Frost from Canada. I don't know which province. I'm sorry. He's an amazing musician and instrument maker. And I've had this for a long time. Well, long time relatively, I guess. It's got friction pegs, as you can see, so
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
little bit. I have a hard time keeping it in tune, which is why it doesn't travel with me. But oh gosh, it records like butter. It's so beautiful. And it's banjo that I play for myself because that's where the sound hole is.
Ah, so you can
So I hear it better
hear
than
it.
anybody. It's such a cheater banjo. I'm just like, yeah. I mean, it still sounds great coming out, but man, it's just like it's like a soul sound.
Mhm.
It just kind of goes washes over me. So yeah, I mean, you have pre. A lot of people get confused. Banjo is not African; it's African American. I was just reading something that Laurent was saying as part of his book. Is something I kind of talk about too. Is people forget that we're not one people. Nationalities, different languages, different religions, different cultures, different music, and then the idea of an African American, whether it's South or North, identity starts to form as soon as people hit the soil on the other side of the ocean, because they have to form. They have already started having to communicate with each other, and then they have to communicate with Europeans, but their own folks. Even though it's not the same language, it's at least the same language system. They can understand each other, and they're in the same, in some ways, because they're in the same boat. So music is one of those things that's how we talk to each other. And so the instrument that we know of now as the banjo starts to form, in the Caribbean, and becomes. Then people start noticing it, calling it the banjo, the banza, the whatever, all these different terms, and then slowly it just becomes, we know it as the banjo, and it's the 1820s and 30s is the first time, it's formed in the 1600s, and the 1820s and 30s is the first time that we have written down that white folk start to pick up, like who knows, sometime at some point, somebody, hello, just stand up, because otherwise it's going to be really weird at the door. If you need to come in, all right? Anyway, becomes
Almost done.
yes, I'm almost done, thank you. The what was I saying? I don't know. Story of my life in 2020 and 2021. Yes, very serious stuff. Right, so white people start to play it, and it starts to make this transition from, a handmade instrument to, an instrument that's being advertised in catalogs and whatever. And so the reason why people don't know this is because, as it made that transition, and there was a good chunk of time where blacks and whites were playing it. And then, there's a great migration, huge displacement of African Americans out of their what they were doing, and so things change, culture changes, new music starts to happen in the North, blah blah blah, but there were still plenty of black people playing the banjo and loving the banjo. And then the recording industry comes and starts to segregate music, and white supremacists start to talk about this mythical white ethnic music of square dance and fiddle and banjo, and fiddle competitions start to come out of the woodwork where black people can't play, even if they're like the best fiddlers in that area, whatever. It's just like all these things start to happen, and then you have media. And so it's just like a perfect storm in the 20s. And then, bluegrass comes along, and most of those, the vanguard of that era, bluegrass, country, whatever, you're talking about Jimmy Rogers, you're talking about any of those guys, they all talk about the black musicians they learned from. They were very clear about it, but somehow it doesn't get into the story. It's starting to now, but so that's the checkered past. It's a past where black people were full participants in the creation of this part of American music and have been written out of the story. they didn't walk away from the banjo. It was the story was erased in a lot of ways, very deliberately. So it's a big job to try to fix that. I try to do my part whenever I can, but because I think the reason why I think it's important is because it is done on purpose to keep us separated. And that means we can't, if we can't come together and go, wow, we did this together. This was like a working class, cross-cultural, multi-dimensional, diverse thing. How amazing. And then it was segregated. We didn't segregate ourselves. We never segregate ourselves. We're segregated, And it's happened in other times in other places with soul music, with this, that. I mean, but I just think it's important to tell the story because music is one of the most easiest ways that we come together. So it literally the truth should be out because, this is one of the more beautiful aspects of our of our species. So why would we not want that out? Why would we not be proud of that? People have to, there might be some people threatened by it, but that's, I'm like, it's not an either or. It's not because we're in it, you're not in it all of a sudden. It's like, then it becomes we're all in it, which is great, because that's the truth.
Want to play something on the instrument you're holding?
Yeah, so I'm going to play a little, it's called Cormanti. I've sort of added some parts to it, but it's from the Hans Sloane document. It's some of the earliest music written down by people of African descent in the New World. Jamaica, and so it's it's amazing. We have these little pieces. We don't have a lot, but we have these little pieces. So this is black made music in the 16 whatever or 17. I can't remember. Really bad with dates. I'm not a scholar. I just play one on TV.
Love that. Now seems like a really good time.
I didn't want to push my luck. I didn't want to push my luck with the gourd. It was like slowly sliding off my flat.
The tuna,
So I put
the tuners on that are fascinating to me. They're pretty hard to tune, huh?
the what?
The tuner buttons.
These things.
Look at that. That's crazy.
Such a beautiful design. And when I get it, it's fine. But getting it, I use my fine tuners on my fiddle, so I'm not very good with these ones. But that piece that I just played, I've actually that is the beginning of the overture to my opera that I was commissioned to write. I wrote a lot of the music on the banjo, and it's basically Michael Abels put it into orchestra notation, and it's amazing to hear banjo tunes.
Yeah.
In the orchestra. It's pretty cool.
It's rad, and thank you for answering the question previous to that on on the history of it. It's fascinating. It's you're such a, like David said, such an amazing scholar and just authority on the subject, and it's really fascinating to hear from you directly how that all comes about. It's an important part of the history of the instrument that we can't ever let go of. So thank you for doing what you do.
Look, I'm someone who puts things together and packages it up and makes it make sense in 5 minutes or less. But to be able to do that means there's so many scholars whose books that I've read who did all the work, and that's really important. I never want that they did the slogging and the footnotes
Sure.
and the this and the that, you know. And without them, I wouldn't have the kind of confidence that I have, you know. So I always like to say, you know, my job, I'm kind of like the musical performing arm,
Right.
the scholar team, you know, like they do all the stuff, and then I kind of try to, you know, put it out there in a different way to people who may never, you know, um,
Yeah.
like I can get them wrong because I'm just a banjo player, you know. But I try to get it my facts as straight as I can, and you know, I have no problem saying if I'm wrong or if I screwed that up. But you know, it's a
But
lot
you're
of great
planting
people
seeds
writing a
as
lot of great
well.
stuff.
You're planting seeds in people's minds
Yeah.
that maybe they didn't know certain things, and maybe some of them will take that, you know, and run with that piece of factoid information, or some of them might, you know, delve into that world a little bit deeper. So I think that's probably the most important part, is that you're at least making people
Yeah.
think about it, and that's
That's all I want, because you know this stuff has been hidden for too long,
right.
and for me, the more I discover them, the more I'm like, dang, that's cool. Why wouldn't we want to know that? That's freaking cool.
It is cool. That's
You
the
know.
thing. History is cool. Whether it's, you know, history is history, unfortunately, and there's wonderful parts and maybe not so wonderful parts, but it's all important. And so
Yes.
appreciate you for doing that. I'm gonna jump in and take some questions. I know you've got, you know, a little bit of time, and I know your beautiful kids are waiting to see when mommy's done. So let's get to a couple of
They're watching
questions.
now.
Watching cartoons. So definitely a few people asking in the chat about kind of how old were you when you started getting into clawhammer or banjo in general, and kind of who were your influences. Some trying to get into that.
Well, I started relatively late. I grew up hearing bluegrass banjo. My uncle played. He played guitar, but he played in a bluegrass band. Evidently, my grandfather on my dad's side was a bluegrass musician, so it's kind of in my blood in a lot of ways. But I never heard old time till I was an adult, and I
Okay.
remember, just come in if you need something.
They can come in and say,
Seriously.
hey. Say hi.
So yeah, so I didn't was listening to a Dolly Parton CD, is her Little Sparrow, and there's a song in there, Marry Me, and at the end it goes into this clawhammer breakdown, and I was like, what is that? Oh my God, it's so funny because Justin Robinson, who was one of the other co-founders of the Chocolate Drops, he and I had this moment where that was the first time we really heard Clawhammer, was like in that moment of Marry Me, like, what is this? And but then I discovered, you know, the dance community in North Carolina, and a lot of the conchas and squares, and a lot of the music was old music.
Yeah.
And so I started hearing Round Peak and kind of going, what is this amazing thing? And so I was 23 or so, 23,
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
24, I borrowed a banjo
Yeah.
and just kind of locked myself.
Yeah. That's the way to
Say
do it.
what?
That's the way to do it. Just lock yourself away and just and get hooked on it,
It
right?
slowed down for a second.
Yeah, we got a couple of little connection issues, unfortunately, but
Yeah.
you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Okay,
Close the
cool.
door.
Gotta love kids. This is 2020, 2021. This is what it's like. This is the Zoom world that we
This is
live in
it.
right now. Yeah, I understand. I have kids. I get it.
But I did take like a week long workshop with Kathy Fink.
Oh, cool.
And I took a lesson here or there, but mostly it was just kind of like sounding like crap for for a while. And then when I was just kind of like just getting it, you know, and then I started playing with Joe, and that was it. You know, all three of me, Justin, and Dom hadn't really been playing old time that long when we started playing with Joe, and so it really fundamentally changed, like, you know, affected how we play old time music by playing with him so much, you know, and learning his music.
That's really, really cool. And a couple of people asking and making comments that you also play fiddle, right? What other instruments do you play besides banjo and fiddle? Is it those two, or?
I mean, that's mostly it. All the rest of my stuff is in my voice, because I sing a lot of different styles. But I do play. I've switched to viola now. I cross tune my viola,
Okay.
and I play in C instead of G because I just love the sound of it. And I also have an octave viola, which is like
That's
cello. It's
cool.
like a cello. It's amazing. I
Yeah.
play a tiny bit of guitar.
Okay.
Um, that's it. And that's it, really.
Stringed instruments. Yeah, I think that's really cool. I like it. One of the questions that I had personally was actually in the interview on that magazine that I showed you at the beginning, which I love. But there's a line in there that you said where you refer to songs as historical artifacts, and that if we listen, and look into them in the right context, that we can reap all the benefits, or a lot of benefits from those. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Maybe throw in some examples of things that have really kind of hit you in that way, to kind of shape where you are now.
Yeah, I mean, you go back, like I for one, there's a lot of songs. I mean, I don't know how many specific examples I could give in from old time music, but I remember the moment where I was like, oh, I understand my grandparents so much more right
Mhm.
now by really digging into these songs. Songs come out of a time, they come out of a moment, they come out of a culture. And I think it's really important to know what you're singing about. I think it's really important to know where the song is coming from. I sing a song called Underneath the Harlem Moon. I taught half a class on it last week for Santa Clara. And if you take those lyrics and dissect those lyrics as sung by Ethel Waters, not the original Coon song,
Yeah.
but what she does with it, it's like Harlem is laid at your feet, and or the like from the Harlem Renaissance,
Yeah.
and you just kind of go, oh my gosh, I really would love if history classes would use music and art as well,
Yeah. Yeah.
like the creolization of American culture. That recent book that looks at the paintings, the famous paintings of by, oh God, I've forgotten his name. I'm really tired. I have to say, I've been mothering
So
all day. I'm a bit wrecked. But
it's okay.
um, looking at paintings, like contemporary paintings, looking at contemporary music, and discovering like a lot of minstrel songs were political. A lot
Yeah.
of them
Yeah.
were used for political things, and I just think the more that we could kind of there's historical scholars and then there's musicologists, and I think there's an overlap that we're not taking advantage of, and that's kind of where I
Mm,
sit, is in between those two, because you don't have music without history, and you don't have history without music. Like, they coexist. I mean, they have
right.
to, because
Absolutely.
every song is in a historical context. So the more that I have dug into that, the more rewarding it's been for me and my understanding of not only where I come from culturally, but where we're going.
That's
You know,
very profound. I love it. I love it. I thought you might give me a really insightful answer on that one, so I appreciate that.
I
I
don't think
like it.
about it too much.
Well, it's your life, right? It's your life. Yeah, it's been a real pleasure. I know that, like I say, I think we're coming up to the hour. I guess I mean, just looking at the chat right now, there's not a ton of questions, but there are so many people kind of reminiscing on when they saw you, when they first saw you at a particular banjo camp and had a chance to talk to you about music, or they saw you at this opera house or at this venue in California, and it's so like just really cool to see everyone just rallying around, and just not just as a musician, but like, again, like what you're doing for the history of the instrument, and just pushing it forward, in ways that other artists might not. So I think on behalf of David and myself and everybody, watching and contributing to the chat room, thank you. You're awesome.
Well, I don't know about that, but thanks for letting me join you and remind myself of what I actually do for, for a living. It's not just cooking, which I don't mind cooking. I really don't. I've learned a lot. I know how to make biscuits now and bread, all sorts of things.
There you go.
But
So yeah,
um, but yeah, I think that the banjo, as a final word, the banjo is the perfect image and emblem of America. and the more that we embrace the beauty of that and the entirety of that, like all of it, the more we can understand about ourselves, about the American identity, culture. It's not a black or white thing. It really isn't. I mean, there's aspects of it, of course, that are affected by who we are, and certain groups have had harder times than others. That's, and that's by class, by race, by whatever. But ultimately, the American character is I think beautifully represented by the banjo, the mixture of all the things that go into that instrument. So that's one of the reasons why I will never stop talking about it.
And of course, it's a tool. It's a tool for something that can really, unite us. Music is one of the things in the world in general that brings everybody together. I'm looking at it right now. You're talking about America, but also there's a ton of people in here from England, Ireland, Romania, who are tuning in as well, and they all feel the same way. So couldn't agree with you more.
That's because America is made out of everyone.
This is true.
That's everybody sees a piece of themselves. I mean, we need to embrace that way more, I think, because it is beautiful.
Couldn't agree with you more. David, any parting words of wisdom, pearls or otherwise?
Thank you very much. It was a blast to talk with you and listen to you play. So
yeah,
care.
You're welcome.
It really was.
Nice to talk to y'all.
Thank you for everybody for tuning in. This will be up on the Deering, so deeringbanjos.com/Deering Live, probably by the end of today, and on our YouTube channel as well. Tune in for the next few episodes, but we'll see you again, I think, Dave, next week or the week after. We'll post it.
After Alison Brown.
Yeah. A little bit of Alison Brown coming up. So.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. Thank you. Go enjoy your evening. I know it's late there. Enjoy your kids. And thank you so much for everything.
Thank you. Bye, guys. Stay
Thanks,
well.
Rhiannon.